Okay. Well, it looks like we are live. Well, hello everybody. This is Elijah Manley here again. Thank you for tuning into the live stream. I'm gonna give people a little bit of an opportunity to come onto the stream. Everyone's gonna trickle in a little bit. We are simultaneously broadcasting everywhere, and I have a guest I would like to have introduce herself in just a moment. But before we do that, I hope everybody is taking care of themselves right now. Wearing if you're going out, absolutely wearing a face mask when you're going out. Um, Wearing a glove if you can, and staying home if you can. If you're out there working, just Godspeed, the best to you. You're the best. Thank you to our essential workers, especially those of you working in the healthcare industry, the healthcare field, healthcare professionals, those of you who are first responders, and just everyone else out there. So I'm going to go ahead and start introducing our guest. We have Nada Elmikashfi from Wisconsin-Madison. She's running for the state senate in Wisconsin, the district, I believe. I'll let Nada talk.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nada. Thank you so much for having me, Elijah. I'm up in Wisconsin, not in Florida, and I'm running for the 26th Senate District, which encompasses the city of Madison and the town of Shorewood Hills. So we're a little bit kind of at the bottom of the state. If you look at it like a glove, I think is the analogy we use here. I don't know if anyone watching knows where Wisconsin is, but that's a little kind of rundown on where we are. Yeah.
I get a little confused sometimes when I'm looking at the map. I'm like, where's Wisconsin? I get
Yeah.
Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota mixed up for some reason.
That's okay. That's okay. Awesome. Yeah.
I think I first got introduced into Nada from Twitter. I was
Yes.
on Twitter and I saw a few candidates, and there's not a lot of young people like us running for
No.
office.
No.
When I saw it, I
So
was really
you
happy.
pick them up right away. Yeah. I think I don't remember exactly what tweet it is, but we found each other via Twitter, and then just everything you were saying resonated with me, and I think vice versa. And I think we're probably the only candidates that retweet each other so much.
Absolutely, I try to retweet as much as possible. My
Yeah.
Twitter just got out of control and blew up.
Pretty fun. Yeah. Well,
Um,
what can you do? You can't be
absolutely.
outside.
Absolutely. So just
Yeah.
social media. So I wanted to bring Nada on so we can have a conversation about COVID-19, the novel coronavirus, and how it's affecting young people. But definitely having a broader conversation about young people and young people running for office during this time
Yeah.
too, especially.
Yeah.
And for those of I ran for office too in 2018. I ran for school board. That was an incredible endeavor. And now I'm running for the Florida House of Representatives, and not just running for the Wisconsin State Senate. She'll be a colleague from another state, and hopefully we'll be working together on legislation that obviously will make both of our states better,
Yeah.
and a lot more progressive into the long term. So I want to start by asking Nada a question about her candidacy. What are some of the unique challenges that you face as a candidate for the Wisconsin State Senate? I'm assuming that a lot of them are like mine, but I'm going to let you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I am running in the 26th district, which was held by the longest serving legislator in the country. So Senator Risser's tenure spans from 1963 until this March when he retired. Yeah, so he's a great guy who is a Democrat. We're in a very progressive hub in Wisconsin, and he served our community well. In December I worked for the governor and I worked in the Senate. And I was really looking at these major policy areas that had gaps in leadership, specifically that affected my community and communities that I felt were unheard. And so for me, it was a decision to run that was based on what I thought Madison could do better, and looking forward in the future. Obviously, as a Muslim Black woman, I'm also an immigrant from Sudan. I immigrated here when I was 6 with my parents when they won the diversity visa lottery. And so people like us, I think, Elijah, are not meant to run for office. We're not meant to hold power, whether that is institutional, whether it is, you know, rooted in kind of systematic disenfranchisement as a discussion, obviously. But I think what it goes to show is that institutionally we aren't backed up. And so one of the biggest challenges I had was declaring against a sitting incumbent, who, you know, you can't say like he's a bad person or a bad legislator. But for me, Wisconsin in October was voted or was determined to be the most segregated state in the country. So for me, that showed that there were problems and there were disparities that I lived through, and a lived experience that I thought would inform a lot of the policy that I thought was not getting passed on the Senate level. And that was the seat that I thought, would get the most change, and I went for it. And obviously, I think, Elijah, you've seen a lot, that the press hasn't been entirely too fun, and we've sent out press releases to all of the publications in the city, and it was before the COVID-19 crisis really started being a big thing. And so the news cycle wasn't as busy as it was now, but they didn't find any interest in someone declaring against a sitting incumbent of 57 years. So that's when it started. And that's when I realized that there was a lot of issues I'd have to work through, but we pushed through. We really focused on what was important, which is connecting with Madisonians and the people that live here and hearing their voices. I think you saw yesterday that the former mayor of Madison kind of he refused. There's two other people of color running, and there is a woman running also that entered the race the day after Senator Risser retired, who has run for governor before and representative on the Congress level unsuccessfully. And so when people look at this race, when politicals or journalists look at this race, they tend to erase the people of color that are running. And so in our response to that, in our response about the issues that really affect us and why we want our voices to be heard, it got labeled as identity politics by a former mayor and reduced to, I think he used the word cancerous. So I'm getting like notifications about it right now. But so those are just, I think, hurdles that not just Black people when they choose to run for office or young people when they choose to run for office face. I think it's just a question of working class voices and coming from marginalized communities and what we have to put up with. So that's a very long answer to your question, but it also I wouldn't be able to stop talking if you get me started on other things.
Yeah, I think you said it. I think you said it perfectly. People like us are not even supposed to run for office.
No.
Like 30 years ago, you wouldn't have seen somebody in their 20s about running for office, let alone people of color. And we see all of the challenges that like we face as like candidates running for public office. Everything from media erasure and blackouts to when they do decide to cover us every once in a blue moon is something negative, or is just the word cancerous. Somebody
imagine
say that in the year 2020 about someone of color running for office. It's just, what's behind that? I know there's a lot of like I read some of the articles. I read an op-ed you put. I forget the paper you wrote on.
The Isthmus is what it's called. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It was a really powerful op-ed. It was really good writing. I think.
Thank you. I was so mad. I was like typing really quickly, so I came from the heart. Thanks.
Could you talk a little bit about that and like the challenge, those challenges, and like your response to it, and like how difficult it is to respond to stuff like that when we should.
Well, for me, I think in an ideal situation, I want people to look at me as an individual in just me as Nada and what I bring to the table experience-wise. And the idea of centering my race, this is a very progressive, a so-called progressive area. Like there will not be a Republican challenger in this specific district. So for me, the idea that someone that would be from a progressive or Democratic background would force me to defend why I'm calling for racial equity was something that was really hard for me to navigate as a former constituent of him, and it also was difficult to navigate as a candidate, right? I'm here to talk about policy and racial equity, and then I have people making me feel like I'm taking away from other groups in this district. And for me, what I said to Dave is that maybe you're used to representatives and senators that only serve the people that look like them. And so you're afraid of me doing the same thing. But for me, when you look at racial equity, when you talk about identity politics, when you're talking about equalizing everyone in this area, you're bettering the lives of white individuals, of non-black people as well. It's not, I'm not just running to be the black candidate, but I am running to be the candidate that is black and that understands the struggle of communities of color. And so right away, I knew I was going to be forced into a corner where everything that had to do with me had to do with my race and my identity. But I think it's a corner I'm fine to be in, because it's an important conversation that obviously hasn't been had if we are the most segregated, clearly. It's a conversation I'm going to continue to have, no matter how much his name is Citizen Dave, hates it, because I think there's a distinctive progressive bias in this country, in my opinion, where everyone really has progressive values and really wants to see equity. And so I refuse to let a few people that have, opinions that don't fit with modernity and progressiveness try to define my race for me.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you said that better than I could. And I know there's questions on here. We'll definitely get your questions. Please feel free to ask them. I want to go. I want to go back to what you said, but my brain is.
That's okay.
There's a lot of information there, and I think it was all good.
Yeah. Let me know if I'm talking too much.
No,
I
you're
tend
talking.
to do that.
You're feel free to talk it out. It's a lot of information, but I definitely want you to talk about some of those issues that are facing your district. But back to identity politics, we hear this a lot from people.
Yeah.
We never hear when you have a candidate who's not of color, a white candidate. Right?
Yeah.
We never hear someone saying that they're talking about identity politics. Right?
Yeah.
They're just focusing on white people. We never hear that.
Yeah.
Anytime a person, candidate of color, even if we're not focusing on identity politics, even if we're just talking about issues, we're always boxed into a corner, like you said. We're always boxed into a corner where we're necessarily talking about identity politics. So instead, we're not necessarily just focusing on our communities. We're focusing on everybody, but we understand that in order to address the problems of everybody's communities, problems, we have to talk about the people who are facing the disparities the most. For some reason, they don't understand this.
Yeah, and it's like they set a trap for you. The minute you're the black candidate and you come out talking about racial equity, it's like, okay, well, we can write them off because this is their only area of expertise, which I think is like just a miscalculation of like where we are as a country. Because if I'm sitting here saying that we need to bridge gaps in education between our black and white students, making your classroom more diverse isn't just going to help black children in Wisconsin, it's going to help your white children as well, because a more diverse classroom has benefits for everyone. And I think I can't write off everyone and say that they all are racist. I don't think Citizen Dave is racist, but I think there is, because of the lack of conversation, because there haven't been candidates like us, these are just coming about now. So there's a silver lining. I think I like to look for the silver lining, or else I'd be miserable for a very long amount of time. Yeah.
I definitely want to ask you a question about those issues that are facing your district.
Yeah.
But there are a lot, and they're probably similar to the issues facing my district. But I definitely want to know what those issues are and how you're going to address them as a state senator.
Yeah. So for me, a really big issue that kind of pushed me into running for office was housing reform. So Madison right now is going through an affordable housing crisis where our population is far out growing the affordable housing stock that we have. And because of a lot of systemic issues, building affordable housing units isn't very easy, it seems like, on the local or state level. And so for me, growing up in Madison, again, I was born in Sudan and we immigrated here when I was 6. And so when we came here, we would move around a lot. And I thought that was kind of, what American life was like, where you picked up every year or a couple of months to move to a new apartment. And as I grew older and I went to high school and college here at UW-Madison, the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I worked in the Capitol for the governor and the Senate, I started to really conceptualize and articulate the experience that I had gone through as a low-income Black, daughter to working class Black immigrant parents, and that was incredible gentrification and displacement. And so, looking at policies specifically that kind of incorporated housing and development, I realized that within our progressive circles and our progressive legislators, there were incredible gaps in really making sure that we're, holding a housing first initiative and targeting the affordable housing crisis in an effective way. And so that really pushed me to run for office, because the people that I, looked up to all my life, and they've held those seats for a large majority of it. Senator Risser certainly for all of my life. I saw that there was a need for a lived experience and a need for someone that was willing to reach out to the community and learn from them. What I think, like, a really big thing that happened that really cemented the decision for me to run was I went and talked to the leaders in my Muslim and African immigrant communities here, and I asked them, have these senators and representatives that represent Madison, have they ever come and said, hello, what do you need from us? I don't remember them in my 19 years here. I might have missed a day. I was a kid at school, so I thought it would be fair to ask, and no one could remember. And so for me, that spoke really to leadership, and how we, you don't have to necessarily be from a marginalized community to really understand it or advocate for it. But if you're not knocking on their doors and asking them what they need, you're not going to be able to solve the issues that affect them the most. And so for me, I heard a quote by Ayanna Pressley, and I say it all the time because obviously as a person of color, you go in and you say, like, for me, I worked in the Senate. The biggest scam on the history of Earth is that these legislators are exceptionally smart and have all of these accolades in policy. There are, first of all, there are so many that are not at all. And for me, there are farmers in the Wisconsin State Legislature that legislate just as well, even better than people with JDs. And so but this idea of I'm not supposed to run for this seat, kind of, it gets to you a little bit, and sometimes you believe it, subconsciously. But I was like Googling, like, Black women who have run for office and really trying to find my own voice through their experience. And this quote from Ayanna Pressley just jumped out on me, and that was, you don't need permission to lead, and you don't need permission to heal the communities that you live in and that you are a part of. And so I read that, and I was like, I'm running for office. I'm running for this specific seat because we have so much to do, and that healing doesn't start unless we have that initiative. So that is just one little issue. And obviously, with education and the environment as a young person, those are really important things that I would hope to address as the state senator for the 26th district. Yeah.
That was a powerful quote. I
Thank
love the Congresswoman.
She's amazing. She's so cool. Yeah.
Plastered on my wall, everywhere. You don't need permission. A lot of these are like similar challenges. For both of us, you have people that are like, did you when I first announced I was running, the first question I got to people was, did you ask Representative DeBose whether or not, like, you should? And it was like, I have to ask somebody, did you sit down and talk to such and such about whether or not this is the best way? Did you do this? Did you do that? Did you consult them? And it was like, why do I have to consult? And a lot of the things we hear, and you probably hear this a lot too, is the whole experience thing. What are your accolades? What do you have to bring to the table? I want someone with life experience. And I hear this all the time, is I don't want someone who's 21 years old running my life. And I heard this when I was 19 and running for school board. They said, I don't want a 19-year-old deciding what happens with my $10. And we hear these things all the time for people. And experience is the biggest one. What do you have to say about, like, people who use experience as their big argument? Because we both know that, experience isn't something that's tied particularly to a number or to an age, that experiences may be different for people at different times in their lives. Like poverty is a big experience.
Yeah.
Necessarily doesn't talk. It's not about how much money someone has in a bank account or how many jobs in their lifetime. Sometimes it's about what you had to do to get by, and sometimes, unfortunately, a lot of us had to do a lot of different things when we were younger in our teenage years to get by. And those experiences are not centered in these discussions at all.
Yeah. For me, this has been I think there's a lot of gatekeeping in politics. Number one, this is a very important term, is that the people in power and who have been historically in power, which I don't think it's a specific race, more so it's a specific class of people, right? Like wealth runs this country. And so in gatekeeping, at least in Madison, there's a careerism that pushes a lot of people, which is, and I've gotten this comment a lot, is Nada, you should run for a school board position or a county board supervisor position. This is a very prestigious seat. And for me, that speaks to two things. Number one, people seeing public service as an opportunity to have something for themselves and not so much to serve their communities. And number two, it's a very, very wrong understanding of governance, because in my experience, school board, Dane County Board of Supervisors, Common Council here, they do so much for this city, and they are so incredibly influential, if not on the local scale, more influential than state governorship. And people assume that because it's not as, you don't have to get as many votes maybe, or you're not in the capital, that it's not as important. And so there's this know your place, kind of wait your turn culture. I'm sure you've heard it, that really makes it seem like you have to have certain political office holdings to qualify. And for me, it's about service. The state legislature has the Legislative Fiscal Bureau, the Legislative Reference Bureau, Legislative Technology Bureau. So there are professionals that are there to help you do the research in policy. There are people that, lawyers and accountants and so many different people that are there for you as a senator to really serve your community. And for me, working class people of any age, teachers, doctors, business owners, non-college graduate, you do not need a college degree to run for office and serve. If you have a commitment to your community, then you really can do so much for them. And obviously common sense and a good heart, and you would actually be much better than a lot of the Republicans that I have run into in our state legislature. And so that's first of all, scam number one. Number two, if you are from a marginalized community, it doesn't matter how many accolades you have, they will still call you an unexperienced, right? The time will never be right for you. For me, I serve on the Sustainable Madison board, and so committee, and we look at environmental sustainability and making Madison much more environmental looking and friendly. And all these things that I have done working for the governor in the Senate, those are things that really have informed my experience, but not as much as my lived experience as a poor Black woman here. And I think that a lived experience, not only does it beget creativity, it gives you really great viewpoints of how to solve these issues that don't seem to be solved on a higher level. But it also begets prioritization, right? So if I have a representative that maybe understands everything but doesn't give a shit, about my experience, about my issues, they're not going to solve it. And so we're at the exact same place. And so for me, I like to tell everyone, white, Black, whatever age, whatever race you are, whatever sexuality, gender identity, that there is a place for you if you're willing to serve. And that experience is a gatekeeping method that you just need to reject and work past. That's another long answer for you.
I completely agree with you. You said it better.
Yeah.
I would be saying the same exact things. And the gatekeeping is so strong. And I tell people all the time,
Yeah.
There are people in the legislature to help you. Like most representatives don't even draft their own bills. They,
Yeah.
there's professional people there to
Yeah.
do that. There's
Yeah.
accountants, there's lawyers, general counsel, there's
Yeah.
research, think tanks, people out there to help assist everyone in government with these things. And when
Yeah.
I talk about experience, it's that real lived experience that really matters. How is someone going to understand? How is an older white male going to understand the perspective of younger person of color who may have had to deal with law enforcement, or
Yeah.
who may have had to deal with racism in the education system, systemic
Yeah.
oppression
Yeah.
every day of their lives?
Yeah.
Doesn't just match. And you're right. A lot of these people with these degrees aren't the smartest people in the world.
No, and for me, like, maybe this is a very, ballsy comment for me to say as a candidate in this race, but I think accountability is also very important. But the senator that I declared against has been in the seat since 1964. If there is experience that someone has, it's him. But under his leadership, we are still the most segregated state in the country. There are still so many things that are immovable. So clearly, it's not just experience that you need when you're advocating for the working class. And having that policy background is incredibly important. Like, we're not sitting here saying, like, we won't learn anything about anything. But at the same time, if you can learn and if you have the ability to really interact with these policy in a very holistic, looking at each angle, each person's perspective, then you're going to be far more successful than if you've studied one topic your entire life. So.
Yep, and you worked for the Senate and you worked for a governor too. So that's a experience.
Also, I do. What's interesting is in all the articles when they're saying I'm an experience, they only quote me as like an activist, and they do not put all the other things that I'm in. And so it's like, well, there you go. So am I an experience or not? Like you're confusing me. But
that tells the whole story.
It does.
Let me make sure my phone is charging. Cool. I want this okay, it is charging. So definitely, I know we have some questions here on the thing. Before I get to those questions, sorry you guys, I want to make sure we talk about some of the coronavirus and this pandemic and how it's affecting our different communities. I know this is a discussion. This is when I first entered 2020, my birthday was 6 days into the year, and everything was promising. My 21st year, it just looks like it was going to be happy. I get to go. You're able to go to the club, but I'm able to also drink at the club too. But I'm also able to, everything's about to happen. Things look so great. I'm about to run for office. This year looks so promising.
I know the story. I know where the story is going.
A few weeks that this happens. So, how has this pandemic affected your community, both economically and socially? I'll say for my community, Florida, we are, in somewhere else in a different century right now. I'm trying to figure out how to get back to common sense, where we, I'm pretty sure you've heard about our unemployment system, how that is completely, I don't even know the words to use for it. Mm-hmm. The level of incompetence we've seen is just, sad, and it mirrors what we see on a national level too. In your state, how is that? How both economically, politically, and socially has that coronavirus affected your community, your district, and the state of Wisconsin too?
Yeah, well, I think coronavirus is just one of those things where it's like, this is a really big traumatizing moment in our nation's history. And I feel so much for the people that have lost their lives, the people that are living in fear of contracting the virus. So Wisconsin itself has had a really interesting couple of weeks and couple of months regarding corona on a legislative level. We had a stay-at-home order issued by our progressive governor that was supposed to be in place until next week. And so Republican legislators sued, and the Supreme Court struck it down. And so we were going on a downward trajectory of coronavirus contraction. And we actually saw on Wednesday the most ever confirmed cases in a single day because the state reopened before we were ready, before testing was you know uh, applied on an adequate basis before everyone was safe. For me, this is a very personal issue. I had a cousin who died a couple weeks ago from COVID. She was young. She was an attorney. The last person that you'd expect to die from it. And my mom is severely immunocompromised. So as a candidate, I've avoided going outside because I don't want to put her in that position and harm her in any way. And so signature collecting has been really, really difficult because I, for my own, for my mom's sake, I decided to try to, decrease the amount of times I go outside. So I have a really great team that has really helped out on that end. But I think this is just one little example of where our state is, just emotionally with COVID. Economically, obviously, this holds ramifications specifically for young people that I think are going to last for decades going forward. So right now, Wisconsin's unemployment rate, I think in April was 14.1%, and so as the state is getting ready to reopen or reopening, questions about the economical stability of the state are definitely warranted. I think for young people, especially for me as someone who just finished up college, the job market is unstable at best and at a point of collapse, at worst. And so for Wisconsin specifically and the entire country, what COVID has shown us is kind of the underlying systemic inequity and economical structures that have failed us. And I think that it speaks to how many people really are struggling from day to day, and how many people do not have savings to help them out when they lose a job and need to pay rent the next day. So fortunately for us, we have a really great governor, and I'm not saying that just because I work for him, but he is so exceptionally kind and so exceptionally effective in his leadership. And so we've seen a lot of funding from his office going towards helping out small businesses and helping out communities, marginalized communities, and those who require grants to rehire their employees and really build their businesses back up. So that's really good. I think obviously we've had a lot of trouble with Republicans to try to get exactly what we need going through. There have been so many lawsuits. They refused to cancel the election, the primary election during COVID, and put very many people in danger. And so where there's a lot of legislative hurdles towards really getting Wisconsin where it needs to be. For young people, I think so many of them are facing so much uncertainty, socially and economically. And it's kind of a scary thing to look at the future and wonder what it holds. But I think that because of the accessibility of information, at least we'll know what's happening and what we can do to kind of alleviate some of the burdens that are in the system. For me specifically, looking at the disproportionate amount of people who have died in Wisconsin that are communities of color. So just reading off the statistics, 44% of people who have died from coronavirus in Wisconsin are Black, when we only make up 6.7% of the population. That speaks to underlying public health concerns that have always been a problem, but are incredibly perpetuated by this virus. So it speaks to the lack of affordable care, the lack of housing that makes it, first of all, easier to maybe go a couple months without wages. We have rent increasing 23% over a 5-year span. So people are already being evicted out of their homes, and this crisis certainly doesn't help. And so for me, COVID-19, especially for Black communities, there's this concept in housing when you're looking at housing reform, where a lot of people will be living in close proximity. And so you have the spread of the virus being perpetuated. Not everyone has cars and transportation where you won't be kind of exposed to what public transportation maybe would expose you to. So there's so many things underlying this virus that I think have come to light. But the hopeful thing is that we're addressing these systematic issues while we're trying to heal everyone and make it better for everyone as well. Yeah.
See, those are the things we need our policymakers to be able to capture.
Yeah.
All of them would not understand those things. They wouldn't
Yeah.
understand, how public housing works, how public transportation works, how this affects different communities, and the fact that it's that the disparity is that large. We have 6.7% of the population is Black and 44% of the deaths are Black. It just goes to show you, the amount of racism. And I'll just be flat out honest with it.
It is. I mean, it is. It's racism that perpetuates inaction. And I think for me, what's given me hope is that I organized in the 2018 midterms. We had Governor Scott Walker in office before. If anyone doesn't know who he is, please give him a quick Google and a quick tweet reply about what you don't like about him. Not to be petty, but for me, organizing that election and making sure we had a progressive voice directly affected the death rates. Like, because of our leadership, even though they have been opposed at every step by legislative Republicans, they've saved lives, including my mom's, by instituting this safer at home order, even though it was knocked out 2-3 weeks beforehand. But the differences between progressive candidates and our Republican counterparts is the fact that Governor Evers and his administration acknowledged that this has disproportionate effects on our Black community members, our Latinx community members, our Native American community members. And so let's institute free testing, whether you have symptoms or not, for them. Because they are affected in disproportionate rates. So something like that, something as nuanced like that, something as direct of a solution would never have happened under Governor Scott Walker. And so it's also really honed in the importance of having progressive Democratic leadership, whether they are, as left as I am. There's still a major difference. So I hope people vote. I hope people run for office, because those solutions, only we can bring them. Yeah.
That's true. Only we can bring them, and nobody else is going to do it for us.
Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely. Let me see. I know we have a bunch of questions here that are in the comments, but before
cool. I can't see who's watching because I'm on the app. There are a lot.
We are live. We have a bunch of people trickling in and out.
Cool.
On Facebook, it's 11. On Twitter, I don't know the number. It doesn't show, but I do see some of the comments from Twitter.
Cool.
Somebody named Timmy Tweaks said, I'll show his thing. He said, "You are both working to epitomize what."
Thank you. We're just trying to make it better for all of us. I promise. That's it. Like, it's so hard to do, but at the same time, we get to meet so many new cool people and really amplify your voices. And so for me, I don't know about you, Elijah, but it's an honor. Really.
It's a great honor, and we're not doing it for any other reason but to serve and help people. There's so much other things we can be doing as young people, and we're choosing to do this because really it's our future, and we want to help. And I would rather not have it any other way, to be honest.
Yeah, me too. It makes it definitely worth it.
100%. I know we have this one. This is a question by Kathleen, my friend Kathleen Bonzik from Florida. I know this one is a little off topic, but it's a question pertaining to a lot of what we're seeing now going on across the country with these school shootings, and these mass shootings in this ridiculous era that we're seeing right now, where we have all of these mass shootings happening, whether they're at schools, movie theaters, and everything.
Yeah.
And what I call the American terrorists, which is going to be premiering soon. So I'll make sure to share some information and plug that in soon. But give us some thoughts on that.
I think gun reform, it's on my platform. Like, I'm looking at it right now. I think it's so important that our children and staff and school employees feel safe during the school day. I don't gun violence, quite frankly, is an epidemic, just like what coronavirus is. Right? We saw a shooting happen yesterday, and my heart goes out to those victims. And in our state, we have a really big gun culture, right? And I think that for me personally, I think that the NRA and powerful lobbyists have too much power on our state legislators, so we don't see great, effective gun reform policies that keep those in the most vulnerable in our state really safe. So for me, I'd really hope to put the safety of Wisconsinites first, to de-invest, state entities and boards from firearm companies, push for universal background checks, and mandatory waiting periods for the purchase of handguns. I have a younger brother who's in high school, and I have younger cousins that are in grade school, and the idea of them, being victims, the idea of anyone being victims of school violence, and gun violence is an incredibly scary thing. And I will do my best as a progressive legislator to, incorporate all the voices in this debate, because it's not just that simple. Correct? It's a very rooted issue in American, idealism and where we see ourselves. But it's also one where we have to be very strong about and very upfront about. So that's a little bit of what I intend to do. How about you, Elijah?
I agree with that completely.
Yeah.
I'm here not far from Parkland. I actually went to school with the Parkland terrorist who did what he did at MSD. And just the power of these gun companies, where they know, they manufacture these weapons, and they lobby these legislators, not to make sure there's no regulation on them, and then they end up getting in the hands of people who shouldn't have them, and they ended up doing things they're not supposed to do. And the other part with these school shootings that is the lack of accountability from some of these parents. I don't want to blame all the parents, but a lot of these parents, in our households, our moms, my mom would never
beat my ass if I even yeah. And I think, like, it also speaks to a lot of the gaps in our mental health services, and really reaching out to people that might be susceptible to obviously there's hate, right? There's a differentiating line between violence and just pure hate, but then there's also people that are struggling mentally. And if we don't have a really great, affordable, accessible, free healthcare system, those people are not going to get helped. And so it's a tragedy that unfolds another tragedy. So that's something also to consider, I think, for us as legislators, is all the different kind of things that it touches on. Yeah.
Absolutely. So
not to cut you off. I realize I cut you off.
We have another question here. Let me make sure I vet some of the questions though first.
I'm gonna scroll through and read all the fun ones too.
Okay, I'm gonna come back. You guys keep asking your questions, and then I will come back and I'll pick up some more of your questions. Next question. For the next coronavirus relief package, what should it consist of? I know that the first coronavirus relief package left out a lot of people. At first it was good for a little bit, it helped out some people. It, got a lot of money into the hands of people who needed it, but like that money went like that. And there was nothing else. It was one time $1,200. It left out a lot of people. And one of the groups that left out were us. It left out a lot of college students who were, maybe were dependents on their parents' tax returns, or they had a different type of income that was not taxable. And they were excluded. They didn't get to receive a $1,200 check, and they're not receiving anything. I know there's some legislation. I spoke to Congressman Ted Deutsch last week, and there's the HEROES Act does have a provision in it that would ensure that these college students get something, and any further relief they will also get, as well as this changed a little bit, but $10,000 in student loan debt forgiveness that's currently slashed by Mitch McConnell, who is about to kill that. There is some things in the works, but what should the next, if there's a next COVID-19 relief package, what should that include?
Well, for specifically, if we're talking for young people, real like an amount of money that's actually going to help and going to last a while. I think 1,700, is that what you just said? Like it does not cover, you know, more than just rent and a couple of bills. You cannot live on that for months, right? That is maybe 1 month if you're lucky. And so I think that we are, and I say this because I come from a third world country. We are the richest country on earth. We have the wealth to be able to help our people effectively and in a way that protects their economy. But the people in charge, you know, are busy bailing out airlines instead of those communities that really, really matter, and those people that really, really matter. And for me, I think Madison is very urban. But looking at the rural counties and places in Wisconsin that really, really are effectively, you know, kind of shut out from a lot of what the CARES Act, you know, kind of allocated. I think I'd love to see more funding for them. We had protests at the Capitol here a couple weeks ago, that were
Anything like
protesting
Michigan?
safer at home. Oh, it was near that, but certainly for me, I couldn't write off everyone as problematic. I know a lot of them were you know, business owners whose own livelihood was threatened by not just coronavirus but the shutdown. And so these are people that, you know, the system has failed just as much as anyone else. And I think focusing on rural areas, I talked to someone who lived up north in Wisconsin, where he said that the internet is so hard to come by. And so any provisions for making, you know, universal broadband would be, I think, just tremendous and revolutionary for not only Wisconsin but the entire country. Those things I think will affect so much change, and obviously there's a lot more. For me specifically, for a lot of trans and queer students that I have talked to, if you know, are not in touch with your family, or because of homophobia you do not have that safe home, because safer at home does not necessarily mean that everyone has a safe home to return to. When you are effectively shut out of a policy and you're dependent on your parents but don't have that safety net of going back to them, you really have no place to turn. And with such, you know, disparate homelessness rates among trans and queer, you know, young people, this is definitely something that I would hope our legislators kind of focus in on, and what I would hope, you know, to help remedy going forward in the Senate here on Wisconsin. But I think like our federal package should hold these provisions that are so important to communities here that are often ignored before this, and that have, you know, clearly been shown to be ignored and continued to be ignored by our Congress. Yeah.
I agree with you, and you know, special, you know, agreement with everything you said, and then definitely with when we're talking about, you know, queer and trans youth. The district I'm in, it has the as a city, Wilton Manors, which has the largest LGBT population per capita in the country. And with the amount of homelessness we're seeing, especially youth homelessness, the number has just went up out of it used to be 2,700 and now it's over 4,500. And it just doubles every year. And there are cases we don't know about where you have young people who, you know, who don't have anywhere to stay, and, you know, they get left out of policy a lot. You know, and, you know, I think with my election, which will be historic, we'll actually have a representative for the first time who's a part of the LGBT community, representing the hub of the LGBT community.
Oh, that's awesome.
Fingers
really crossed. Yeah.
I'm crossing my fingers too.
Voice is important.
It very much is. And what I saw, like, when this started happening, and you know, this was before I got sick, I saw a lot of young people who were being kicked out of their dorms. A lot of schools closed, and they said, "Hey, we need you guys to leave."
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of people are like, "Yeah, they can just go home." But for a lot of people, as you said, there was no safe home to go to.
No.
There was no place to go home to. And a lot of these people, they didn't have, you know, $300, $400, $500 to fly back from UF to Los Angeles. They didn't have that money to get home.
Yeah.
So a lot of them were effectively homeless. And a lot of these were students of color, queer people who just didn't have a place to go. and were left homeless, and they didn't qualify for a $1,200 check,
No.
and there were no services. And these schools were able to effectively just throw these kids out into the street
Yes.
and let them.
Oh, 1,200, not 1,700. I said 1,700 earlier. Sorry. Yeah.
So it's just that I think definitely I agree with you. Like, we need a more comprehensive relief package. We
Yeah.
also need to make sure that, like, whether that's on the state or the federal level, that we have you know inclusive packages that look at these things through, not just a broad lens, but look at communities that are affected the most. Yeah, give everybody what they need, but also understand that you know just saying specifically those who have tax returns excludes a lot of people. And we definitely need legislation, I think, or some amendments in these bills that deal with healthcare. Healthcare is important, and what a lot of people don't understand is that healthcare for people of color may be different than healthcare for white people, and healthcare for queer people, queer and trans people, is a little bit different from the rest of the population too. Our healthcare is just different, and what I've seen a lot of what we're seeing with COVID-19 and just in general is that we don't have cultural competency in a lot of our healthcare professionals, and that ends up affecting the Black maternity rate, infant mortality rate. It ends up affecting queer and trans people who don't have healthcare professionals that either look like them or that understand their lifestyle. So then we ended up having these disparities where South Florida is #1 in the country for new STI and HIV infections, and we don't have a healthcare system that really tries to understand that and tries to, I don't know if it's the same there, but can you speak to like healthcare and how this like ties into this entire conversation?
Yeah, there's, first of all, incredible need for Medicaid for all. I think if anything clearly shows that, it's this COVID, crisis where people don't have the affordable care to go to their doctor and say, I'm feeling really sick and I don't know what this is. And I think a lot of things regarding healthcare are things that have started way before COVID hit. And so a very big, example for this, and it blends so many areas with racial justice and criminal justice, is something called the Federal Inmate Exclusion Policy. And so what this is, it's a federal mandate that denies Medicaid, Medicare, CHIP eligibility for people that are booked into jail. So when you are, incarcerated on the county level, you lose your federal health care and you are kicked off your provider. And you're privy to whatever the county, gives you in terms of health care. And so when you are released, then you have 90 days before you are eligible to reapply. And so with COVID, talking to our local sheriff here, an individual could, well, regularly this waiting period where you cannot get access to any healthcare really perpetuates recidivism rates going up. It perpetuates a lot of people that need mental health counseling, mental health resources, alcohol and drug uh, substance abuse, medicinal products or support, you lose that. And then with Corona, if you encounter the virus within the jail and you are released, there's 90 days before you're eligible to go get tested, to go apply to your healthcare provider and have it back again. So you're perpetuating it by this systematic it's literally called the exclusion policy, which a lot of people are working on the federal level to strike it down. But then what Wisconsin can do is turn from a state that terminates healthcare for inmates to one that just suspends it. So once you are incarcerated, it's just paused, and once you're released, it's automatically instated. And so for me, that is a very clear, legislative, effective policy regarding healthcare that doesn't even tread on the apparently, radical idea of just free healthcare for all. And it's something that a lot of constituents in Wisconsin, no matter what the color of the skin is, whatever, their background or identity is, that they would benefit from. And I think for me, it's so outrageous. It's one of my policy positions that one of the most, vulnerable populations that we should be looking out for is being categorically neglected by our systems here specifically. And it's a bipartisan issue. It's a nonpartisan issue, excuse me, with a very bipartisan solution. And so our healthcare system is rife with these examples. That's just one of them. And so for me, a really big reason I got into running for office wasn't about just the really big policy changes that we're hopeful will be made, but the little things that we can do that can save lives in that moment. And this specifically, this issue I just highlighted is an example of that. And that's I got that from what? From talking to someone that was previously incarcerated in my city, from talking to the sheriff to speak to him about his own facility and if it was protected from COVID, and there's a lot of support that we are missing, and legislators truly have the potential to solve that. Whether they do it or not is another question. I think that's why we're running for office, so we can do it ourselves because they've refused to. So I don't know. Yeah.
Healthcare is big. I mean, I lost my healthcare this year without even being told. I got sick and went to the doctor and turned up having pneumonia.
Wow.
I thought I had the virus, and I still don't know because I wasn't able to get the test because Florida is 14th century. But I went in, I got tested. I needed to get my medicine, and they told me, "Hey, we can't find your thing in there, your Medicaid." I'm like,
wow.
So it turns out, I had to pay out of pocket. Luckily for me, it wasn't too much, and I had like a network of people who were willing to help. But that happens to so many people, and I was just left out there. So that means, the healthcare, because I do have counseling and medicine that I take. That's usually paid for through Medicaid, through our state Medicaid exchange, and now it's gone. And what this virus has done is it's shown the problems that the society already had, and it just brought them and made them a lot more clear for the public to see. Yeah. And especially a lot of that has to do with our healthcare infrastructure, where we have states like Florida that just refuse to expand Medicaid, won't take money from the federal government to expand our program. We have our all of these issues where we're just reaching capacity. And there's solutions, and that's why both of us are running for office, and we see things like the healthcare infrastructure being completely outrageous. And there's plans to fix this. One of the plans I have in my platform that I talk about is having free nonprofit community health clinics in every zip code in Florida, because there are communities out there, especially rural communities. They don't have access to hospitals that are that are in the driving distance, or they don't have transportation to get to the hospital. And when they get there, they don't have money. They have to wait in the ER room forever. So these clinics would bring down the wait times in ER at the ER room, at the emergency room. They would provide people with basic, access to healthcare. They get medicine, testing, counseling, all of those different things. When I said that someone from the Florida GOP attacked me as being a socialist, something from Cuba, USSR attack, called all types of communist dictator, for saying that we should have universal health care for everybody. And it's just insane that our healthcare infrastructure is behind the rest of the developed world, when we're the richest country in the world, and they keep saying we can't afford to do these things. It's just outrageous.
For me, the Republican Party really pushes fiscal conservatism and saving money for future generations, or for the sake of our country. But then it's like, okay, well, where is it? All the money you've saved from fiscal conservatism in the past 10, 20 years, where is it now when you need to save us, right? So that's just a load of bullshit. The idea that we cannot afford a public health system that treats everyone. And I think it is the notion that Medicaid for all is not workable, or that it is impossible, is an idea that isn't rooted, I think, in the reality of what people think. I've been lucky enough to door knock in northern Wisconsin looking like this, right? The first time I ever door knocked was somewhere named Lodi, which has a very small population. And I remember going in with like a black backpack, a black hijab, which is one of these, and wearing all black. And I was like, people are going to think I'm a terrorist, right? And I was really afraid. And I knocked on my first door, and this older white lady slammed open the door, and she was like, "Honey, it's 100 degrees out. I know you're fasting. It's Ramadan. Do you want to come inside?" So that was like, I don't cry, and I was like on the verge of tearing up, because for me, she was as Republican as they come, but there was this shared humanity where, because I came up to her door to talk to her about politics, and someone, we talked about, and she decided, she could maybe consider voting for her. I don't know if she ended up doing it. But because there was this shared humanity, she invited me into her home, and we had a conversation specifically about healthcare. And for her, she did not believe that her neighbors should be put in financial ruin just because they needed to go get medicine or see the doctor. And so I think reality really, the working class and all of America really, I think, is behind free healthcare. I just think those in power on the Democrats and Republican sides are not for it. And so I'd encourage anyone to really look into the research of it, the mechanics of it, to consider whether we can handle it or not, because it is. We literally realistically could. So, yeah.
Honestly, this issue is really important to me. Just losing healthcare just made this more more personal for me. Before it was personal to me, but it just made it more personal now that I'm just walking around and anything can happen right now.
Yeah.
I can't do anything. And I got that hospital bill in the mail. I got 2 hospital bills of several $1,000s. Don't know how I'm going to pay for that. At 21, I don't think anyone at any age should have to do it. But just thinking, like, my introduction to the world is, here's money, here's bills that you have to pay, here's medical bills. And we're in the richest country, and it's ridiculous. But I'm glad that people are able to have these conversations, and even people, in the Republican Party agree a lot of the time with us.
Yes.
I knocked on a door of someone, of a lady who, I think it was like 2 months ago when I first started door knocking early, and I don't know, I think she was a Republican, but I hadn't heard my thing. I introduced myself and everything, and she said, "This is the first time anyone ever knocked on my door."
Wow. Yep.
And I asked her, like, why
Yeah.
No one ever knocked on my door, ever, for any race, primary or general.
Yeah.
She said, I never vote because no one ever knocks.
Yeah.
You're the first time you knocked on the door in the heat, sweating. And, she said, if I have to switch over to the Democratic Party to vote for you, I will.
Look at that.
Not just because I like the issues you're talking about, but I see you're putting in the hard work. And you just don't have a lot of people with compassion and authenticity in politics. And you definitely bring that compassion.
I hope. Thank you. For me, and like people, the institution, when you're in a very progressive city, if you talk about the Democratic Party and its shortcomings, people don't like it. And I'm learning that very quickly. But to be completely honest with everyone, like, I'm not going to sit here and crap on the Republican Party without holding my own accountable. The Democratic Party has a very ingrained elitism and institutionalism that keeps it from really reaching so many people that are harmed by the system, and people that can really really connect with the issues and the values we hold, because we automatically write them off as not us, right? And so in my hope for Wisconsin is to not just serve my urban community here in Madison, but to touch base and to serve those that do not look like me, right? Those who have not been reached by the Democratic Party because their voices haven't been seen as important. And so I think that viewpoint stems from how the Democratic Party has ignored me, correct, and my family, as a Black woman, as an immigrant. But I think, like, what I at least bring to this race, what I hope to bring is this reflection of where we are as Democrats and where we need to go, because we are nowhere near perfect. And your example is one of the ways that we truly kind of stray away from democratic ideals.
Absolutely, I agree with you there. I got one more good question here, and then I'm gonna see if there's any questions. But this one is definitely something I think is important for us. how does our response to this pandemic show that we have a lack of readiness to address climate change? And I say this as someone like from a coastal community in South Florida where sea level rise is really no joke, and it's something that we're gonna face the consequences whether or not we start acting now, unfortunately, because we waited so long. But it's something I think we can try to stop the worst of happening if we act big. And this is really like a real life or death situation for like my entire community and our entire fortunes and everything we hold dear, our schools, our communities, our families, everything we know, our landmarks that are going to be underwater or face the possibility of being destroyed due to the effects of climate change. What do you think about this?
I think for me, conversations I wish we're having more in Wisconsin, or at least in my groups. I have a minor in environmental studies, and the first thing you learn is that infectious diseases are perpetuated by climate change and this climate crisis. So we very well might see coronavirus, reappearing in a different form because of the earth warming up. And so for me as a young person, for me as a representative of in a way this next generation that's really going to feel the effects of our deteriorating climate, making sure that we go carbon free as fast as we can is incredibly important. And so for me that manifests in decarbonization, not by 2050, but by 2030. And I am, a very adamant supporter of the Green New Deal or an infrastructure like that, because I think that climate activism, environmental conservation, sustainability, all really affect transportation, housing, flooding affects the housing crisis so much. And so there's a lot of interconnectedness that I would hope a really rigorous, effective, and strong voice on combating the effects of climate change, can do. I know for me personally, my work on the Sustainable Madison Committee here with the Madison Common Council is really, we've taken sort of a break because we're not allowed to meet during COVID, but really looking at how residential properties can be upgraded to be more sustainable and have companies, electric companies like we have MG&E here in Alliant, really can include their consumers in the cost saving that happens when you upgrade homes. And residential properties are going to emit so much carbon that if we commit ourselves to get union base labor to upgrade homes for people that otherwise couldn't in a way that is cost saving for them, really saves us in a couple decades. And so for me, that's a really big policy area that I'd hope to expand on and to be the most progressive voice on in the Senate. And I do this not only for the vulnerable populations right now, but for our future children and our future generations that constitutionally also have a right to an environmentally conscious country, or a country that isn't destroyed by natural disasters that are otherwise avoidable. So yeah,
You said
problem.
the best on that. And let's see, do we got any more questions or comments on here? Let me see. My friend Muqtadir said he's proud of us for holding this thing. Thank you.
That's fun. Thank you.
That's amazing. Keep doing the good work. We have, let's see who else we have here. Let's see. Do we got any more? I'm just showing you some of the comments that we got from people.
Oh yeah, spaceship. There are people that literally are landlords, and you're trying to tell them like, hey, rent control. Hey, let's not, jack up prices for people that are still getting paid, a minimum wage that is horrendous. They don't care, right? That is why the base solution for a lot of our problems is in the forward looking that we do, and that's in you right now, Spaceship. I don't know your real name. Looking at if you want to run for office, if your voice is effective, and making that decision. That is how you implement long-lasting, effective change to people that are there to enrich themselves. Like public service, as it doesn't pay and it should not pay, but you have Democrats specifically that are millionaires, right? And I think that's telling of where our democracy is, and it's discouraging, but there's always a solution. If you go out, knock doors, even run for office, convince your family members to vote, you can get them out. So there's always hope, maybe.
There's always hope that people are just do it. Even if you're too afraid, go out and do it. You never know what will happen. I did not know I was going to, do as well as I did last time with 43,000 votes. I didn't think that was possible.
Look at you. Yeah.
It's possible, but it had to be done. And, I think we're going to keep doing it. And our friend
Thank you.
You're amazing. Thank you for coming on. Do we got any more comments? I think that's all of our comments on here.
Okay.
We got everything too.
Cool.
I was supposed to add this ticker at the bottom, but I didn't do that. But it's okay.
That's all right.
So yeah, we're getting close to our closing out point. So I just want to give you an opportunity to close with anything you would like to say. Also, get information for your website too. I'll make sure share your website afterwards.
Yeah.
I want to donate. People that want to sign up to volunteer virtually. I'll probably know other ways too. Yeah,
definitely follow us on Twitter. You'll see me and Elijah talking back and forth with each other. Like, oh my God, this is so true, which is a lot of fun. Look at our website. We're trying to make it as accessible as possible, as understandable as possible. I know, again, policy and politics sometimes is given to you in a package that is inaccessible. And so we're trying really hard to kind of incorporate all voices in what we write. So if you're looking at the platform and there's something you want to add, even if you're in Florida or anywhere else, shoot us a text message and I will, or an email that's linked in there, and we'll definitely read it and I'll reply to you. I'm in this because I love talking to people. I love getting to know their opinions. So any way you want to interact with me in my campaign, I'd welcome it. So thank you so much for having me, Elijah. I've appreciated it very much.
Absolutely. It was really good to have you. Very enlightening conversation, enlightening hour where I learned a lot and discussed a lot of very important issues. Can't wait to really have you back on here again to talk about some more issues, and hopefully
in
the future have you on again as a senator, of course, and hopefully
fingers crossed.
We'll be talking about what we're actually doing.
That's the plan, hopefully, and you as a representative as well. And before I forget, if anyone wants to run for office, I know that jump is really, really terrifying, but me and Elijah have gone through it, so you have a little bit of an easier time yourself. You don't have to be Black, you don't have to be young. Whoever you are, if you're there to serve your community in a progressive way, reach out to us. There's a lot of resources that are here to help you. And what a better way to really fix the system than messing it up with your voice and messing up the status quo. So feel free also to DM Elijah, and he can give you my number and have a conversation with me about launching a campaign, because it's 2020 and we need it. Yeah.
Absolutely do. All right now.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. I'm gonna log off. Do I just leave? Don't know how to leave the stream.
All right, guys, I'm going to do official
okay.
Broadcast and then the live.